And hello, fabulous AP students. This is your favorite teacher, Mr. Jacobson. I am excited to be with you today. Today, we are going to talk about the developments in Europe from 1200 to 1450. Gosh, there's so much that is going on in Europe, and it's all pretty critical because it sets the stage for 1450 to 1750, which Europe becomes pretty much the center of the world in that regard. And so it's so much to talk about. I'm really excited to be with you. Let us begin. Okay, so uh, after the fall of Rome, okay, and again, Rome's going to collapse in 476. We're going to see Western Europe kind of go into a dark period because the fall of Rome sort of collapses that whole government, and there's not a whole lot of order. There's not a whole lot of safety. And so people in that region are trying to figure out how they protect each other, right? And so you're going to have like kings, and you're going to have lords and peasants, and they're going to start banding together. They're going to start creating agreements that provide common defense for one another. Um, One continuity that we're going to change from the fall of Rome up until about 1450 is that the Roman Catholic Church is still going to have a significant influence theologically over the people and even politically. So the Roman Catholic Church's influence grows considerably even after the fall of Rome. So feudalism becomes the government by which Western Europeans use to sort of protect themselves. This is a decentralized political organization based on a system of exchanges of land for loyalty. This system was created to protect land from outsiders such as invading Vikings in Northern Europe, maybe even bandits, etc. Neighboring lords even. Just it was designed to be a protection, a system of protection. So how does this work? Okay, so you have a monarch or a king, and that monarch king has a bunch of land because they're the king. And so what they do is they start granting a fief or large amounts of land to lords. In return, the lords become that king's vassal, and they vow to protect the king at all cost. So the king gives a bunch of land called a fief to a lord. That lord accepts the land, but in order to accept it and to get it, he has to basically bow his knee and swear fealty or swear his allegiance at all costs to the king. In return, that lord gets all that land, and I want you to understand, land equals power. So the more land you own in the feudal system, the more powerful you are. So once that lord gets all that land, that lord then needs a way to protect all that land. He can't do it all by himself. So then that lord will give pieces of his land that he was given from the king. He's going to give away pieces of his land, portions if you will, to knights. Knights are nobility who are basically special soldiers, right? And so those knights will get a smaller piece of the Lord's land. However, they can't get that unless they swear fealty or allegiance to that Lord to protect him at all costs. Are you seeing this? And then lords will also provide safety for peasants. We're going to call them serfs, Serfe. Okay? And these serfs are going to work the Lord's land in return for protection from that Lord in case Vikings or bandits or whatever evil is trying to get them. They're looking for protection. So there's also going to be a code of chivalry for the knights, and the code of chivalry is, well, I mean, you could read them there, but really, it's all about they need to be honorable in their doings, they need to be courteous, and they need to be brave. Okay, they were also required, these knights, to protect women, children, and the elderly These are the groups within the feudal system that were considered the defenseless during that time period. So we're going to see this idea of manorial systems occur, okay? This is a fief. And here we have the Lord's castle, okay? Remember, a fief is a large tract or amount of land that was given. Here we have the Lord's castle, and then we have this giant village. And in that village, you're going to have a church. You're going to have free people, freemen they're called, like blacksmiths, cobblers or shoemakers, bakers. You're going to have a guild for those who play RPG games. Guilds were a very popular thing here in the feudal system. Okay, and then as you can see the large amounts of land out here, this is where the serfs would work the Lord's land, and in return the Lord would allow them to receive his protection. Okay, and when I say the serfs get to, they have to. They're forced to work the Lord's land, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's important for you to understand that the goal of a manor here is to be self-sufficient, to not have to ask other manors or the king for help to keep the economy going. Each manor was in itself supposed to be a little bubble of an economy that could work all by itself and not have any major trading between manors. Now, many serfs who lived on these manors and had to work for their lord, okay, that's all they knew. This was their whole world. They didn't know what was going on because they couldn't leave. They were bound or tied to the land that was the Lord's. So they couldn't they couldn't go away unless the Lord gave them permission. And let's talk about that right now. So the life of a serf is very strange, okay? They're not a slave. A slave is property that's owned by another person. The serfs were tied to the land of that lord. So they had to stay on the land. So in that regard, they couldn't leave the manors unless the Lord gave them permission. They couldn't get married unless the Lord gave them permission. The Lord would say that He will protect them from all the evils out there. In return, they had to give Him tribute, like crops, their own labor, money sometimes, or coins. Um, Children who were born to serfs, they also became serfs the rest of their lives. And so serfdom is a very major mode here of economy, and it's a form of slavery, right? Instead of being as a piece of property by another person, you are you are tied or restricted to that land, and if you want protection from the Lord, you must work it to their satisfaction. So, because land became so important, agriculture became a really big part of the economy in the feudal system. And so there was an innovation that came out that helped maximize the farming output. So it's called the three field system. And the way it worked was one field was planted with wheat and rye. These were the main staple foods that people were really looking for, okay? The next field would be planted with legumes, beans, lentils, okay, and beans and lentils, legumes, they really gave rich soil to the ground after you planted them. And so it did a really good job of making that soil so rich that it would be ripe for a different crop the next year. And then another field, remember this is a three field system, so 1, 2, 3. The last one would lay fallow. Okay, what that means is that they just wouldn't use it. They would let that land rest for a year. And then each year after they harvested, they would rotate it. So year one, here's wheat, beans, fallow. Year two, this would be wheat or rye. This one, because this has the most nutrients, because This is where the beans were planted the year before, right? And then this one would be where they plant the beans and the lentils. And then this one over here would lay fallow for a year. And then so each year it rotates like that. So we have political changes that are going to occur in Western Europe as well. In France, you're going to see a brand new thing called the Estates General. And this was formed to give representation of the people. So in France, there were three major groups. There were the clergymen, the nobility, and the commoners. Obviously, the commoners were the largest. But what that was is you had representatives from those three groups, and they could um, sort of, in essence, represent their group to the king and petition to the king on things. This is going to become really important when it comes to the French Revolution. So keep that in mind, although that's not for a few hundred years, but very important. In England, we got some major breakthroughs. We had the Magna Carta, which is Latin for like great paper or charter. And what happened was you had enough nobles who consolidated enough power to squeeze the king, basically, to get them to agree that there here are a set of laws and rights that we as nobles get, and the king cannot override them, meaning the king just can't say screw you, I'm not going to honor these rights. So this is one of the first breakthroughs where there are rights given to people that not even the king can trump. Okay, not even the king could overthrow. Um, and one of those rights was the right to a grand jury. And then another one later on that year in 1265 is we're going to see an English parliament where we're going to get representation as well. But I want you to understand all this representation and rights, this isn't for the general population, this is for the nobility. So first the nobility will get that recognition, and slowly you'll start seeing that happening for the general populace as well. Also, during this time from 1337 to 1453, we had the Hundred Years' War. This is a war between France and England. It goes on for about roughly 100 years, right? And due to this war, people are going to begin seeing themselves as English and French. As before, they didn't quite do that, but now we're going to start seeing people from England, they're going to start calling themselves English, and people from France will start considering themselves French. Um, Gunpowder is going to be used in this war. We're going to see this technology more often. It came from China. However, China doesn't get it diffused. It gets diffused through Mongolian conquest as they're conquering as far as Central Asia all the way to the eastern borders of Europe. And we're also going to see the Iberian Peninsula, we're going to see things change. Now, for the longest time, the Iberian Peninsula, from like 800 CE to this time period, uh, the Muslims were in charge of this what we call Al-Andalus, right? The whole Iberian Peninsula, or we call it Spain and Portugal as well today. So Muslims are going to control this for hundreds of years. However, we're going to start seeing during 1200 to 1450 something called Reconquista, which is basically Spanish for reconquering. And what it's going to be, there's going to be a series of wars where the Christians are going to start gaining ground and start slowly squeezing out the Muslim dynasties in this region, to the point where they're going to kick out Islam altogether from Western Europe. And in 1492, that's going to be complete. And if you know anything about history, 1492 is also when Columbus sails the ocean blue, and that's not by coincidence. They are related. Only Muslims who converted to Christianity were allowed to stay in Western Europe. So everyone is just sort of forced to become Christian at that point, or they are told to leave. So in Roman Catholicism, we're going to see a few things happen. Okay. In 1054, we're going to see something called the Great Schism, where the Christian church is going to break up into two branches. Very similar to like how Islam broke up into two branches. We have the Sunni and the Shia, right? So we're going to have the Eastern Orthodox and we're going to have the Roman Catholic Christian branches. Now, this wasn't a happy breakup. These two factions, just like Shia and Sunni, typically see each other as opposition to one another. So also will these two factions see each other in the same light. Um, Church and state are going to have some conflicts. One of the reasons is because you're going to have these political struggles. The kings are going to want to exercise their power, but then the Pope is going to exercise his power. And more often than not, the Pope is usually going to win because Christianity is so prevalent and ingrained into the hearts and minds of the people of Western Europe. So to really think about it, the person at the top of the feudal system has got to be the Pope because at this point Roman Catholicism is supreme over everything. It's even above the political kings who are trying to rule their countries. The Pope is still considered higher than they are as far as authority goes. We also see monasticism. Monasticism is simply just putting monasteries in places. These are Christian monasteries. They were a huge part of protection and agriculture in the feudal economy. And we're even going to see women who become nuns, and they'll get to exert their influence and have leadership roles within those monasteries. And then we're going to have the Christian Crusades that are going to break out. So, what are the Christian Crusades? So, for hundreds of years, Christians were able to make pilgrimages or holy journeys to the Holy Land of Jerusalem. Okay, they weren't stopped. However, the Seljuk Turks are going to conquer that region and they are not going to like Christians. And they're going to, one, forbid Christians from doing pilgrimages there. And any Christians that are found in that region, they will persecute them. So now we have the leader of the Orthodox Church, who is called the Patriarch of Constantinople. He is going to make an alliance, if you will, with Pope Urban II of the Roman Catholic Church. Remember, I told you those two factions, the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church, they don't really like each other, but now they both have something in common. They want their people to be able to go to Jerusalem and visit the Holy Land. But now the Seljuk Turks have made that impossible. So they are going to come together and the Pope is going to call a holy war known as a crusade. And he's going to say the famous line, Deus vult, which means God wills it. And he is basically telling his people, God is with you. He wills that you go to war. It's his will that you go to war, and he will make sure that you are victorious. So people will go and the crusades will begin. There will also be primogeniture laws that will also sort of encourage people to go as well. Primogeniture laws guarantee the oldest son to inherit all of the family's estate. So all the castles and all the things that mommy and daddy has, if you're the oldest son, that's all yours when they die. If you're a younger son, you're screwed. Okay, so many younger sons sought to go take opportunity in fighting in the Crusades because they were hoping that the lands that they conquer as a soldier, they'll be able to get some of that land and have their own land and start their own kind of wealth and so on because they don't get any of it when mommy and daddy dies. So the first crusade resulted in victory. They went, they came, and they conquered. And they did that in about 1099 CE is when they did that. They had it for about, I don't know, maybe 100 years or so, and then they lost it. But the first crusade was a success. Um, as a result of European soldiers coming over to Europe, you're going to see a lot of products from the Middle East going back to Western Europe. And this is going to give Western Europe a sense of the finer things of the Middle East. And Europeans are going to become very accustomed to having their spices and their perfumes and anything else that they can enjoy that they didn't get before because they now have increased contact with the Middle East. This is very important because the more accustomed you get to a way of life, the more you're willing to spend for it and the less you're willing to give it up, which is very important in the next time period. Now, the first crusade we talked about, I'm just going to jump to the fourth crusade. These are the two crusades I think AP wants you to know. There are other ones, but these are the two most significant. This crusade wasn't even against Muslims, it was against fellow Christians. And this is really sad because this sort of jades the whole crusade thing, and seeing that it really, unfortunately, not all of them were genuine, if you will, as far as what their objective was. So powerful merchants in Venice. Venice is right here, okay, in Italy. They wanted to limit the competition with the other merchants from Constantinople in the Middle East and the Black Sea. They wanted control of trading here and up here. But the people in Constantinople, the merchants, they had very strong economic ties that made that very hard for them. So what the merchants of Venice, they told the Pope, you're going to call another crusade. And this time, the people are going to go, and when they go to Constantinople to stock up before they come over and supposedly fight in the Holy Land, they're going to sack Constantinople. They're going to burn it to the ground. They're going to rob it. They're just going to destroy that city. And then that's going to make it so we, the merchants in Venice, can now control the Black Sea and we can control the Middle East trade. So they did just that. It worked exactly as they planned. However, not only did the sacking make it so they can have control, but it made the Byzantine Empire so weak that you're going to now see in about 200 years that that's the end of the Byzantine Empire. The Ottoman Turks are going to come. They're going to conquer once and for all Constantinople, which was a heavily fortified city, and they are going to put an end to the Byzantine Empire and start the new Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire is going to block off the Black Sea, and they're going to block off the Middle East from Western Europe anyway. So the Jews are going to get treated pretty bad in Western Europe. There's going to be a lot of discrimination. Jews couldn't own property, or they just had so many stigmatizations upon how they could live that some of them started getting pretty smart and finding ways around it. So, that they couldn't get a loan, but they could lend money, and so a lot of Jews became money lenders, and that put them in a position of power because then people had to owe them money who weren't Jews, who were Christians, and eventually people kind of got mad because Jews were starting to get powerful and very wealthy because of their intelligence and their ability to sort of, create a life, even in a life where they were kind of given a harder obstacle to overcome. And so something that's going to arise is called anti-Semitism. And what that is that sentiment towards Jews are going to become hostile. They're going to look at Jews with hatred. And Jews are going to get expelled from Western Europe, Central Europe, and eventually Jews are going to be pushed to the further eastern parts of Europe where they might be accepted. But Jews, just everywhere they went, for some reason, anti Semitism would arise no matter what in history. Now we're also going to look at the origins here of Russia. The Byzantine Empire traded with the region north of them known as Kiev Rus. So the Byzantine Empire and Kiev Rus, big trading partners. As a result, Greek Orthodoxy Christianity is going to diffuse to Kiev Rus, and you're going to see Christianity get really strong in that region, and that's going to create stronger ties between Byzantine Empire and Kiev Rus. However, then the Mongolians are going to conquer Kiev Rus, and they're going to basically alienate Kiev Rus from the Byzantine Empire. And so they're going to sort of lose those ties and kind of create their own minor culture up there while the Mongolians, known as the Golden Horde, conquers that region. And then about 200 years, so we're in the 1400s now, Ivan the Great is going to come from that region, and he is once and for all going to free the people of that region, Kiev Rus. He's going to free them from the Mongol rule, and he's going to set up the modern state of Russia. And he's going to make his capital in Moscow. And that's going to put us right to where we need to be. So I know it was a long one. I hope it was informative. Go ahead and write your one-page summary, and we'll talk about this when we return. Thanks.